During this week, many people sent me on via WhatsApp or message a a picture of a statue of the Child of Prague that an LGBT group had turned into like a drag image, and they were organizing a hike up Patrick tomorrow, and there was calls for people to gather to protest in Patrick. And many people said, well, will you not blog about this? Would you not share it and promote this protest and so forth? And I didn't intentionally do that because I really need to give some reasoning behind this. Many times when you see these stunts done by certain people or certain groups, oftentimes it's a call to attention. It's a call to look at me. It's a call to create media, conversation, etc., etc. If we look back, 1992, I think it was Saturday Night Live, and Sinead O'Connor, an Irish singer, she tears a photo of the Pope live on television, and there was massive media outcry. Catholics were outraged, they were annoyed, etc., etc. But if you dig back and look at underneath the actions of this singer, this singer that became a Catholic priest, supposedly, and then became a Muslim, and she had every type of tattoo, and she was, all of these different problems that went around that woman's life. And ultimately she had to witness the suicide of her own son, and then sadly she died. It would put into the light a little bit more the stunts that she was doing, which were really more so a manifestation of what she was carrying inside. And it's the same with some of these events and stunts that are organized by LGBT groups. You would ask, okay, what is driving you to do this? It's a manifestation of something that you're trying to what? Get attention, get affirmation, etc., etc. If you look into the gay world, the LGBT world, there's people look at this manifestation of this culture, but underneath it, there's a very sad reality in the lives of many of these people. 25% of gay men have been sexually abused as children or teenagers. That carries a great amount of shame with it, that they have to cope with in many ways. They have to deal with in many ways, and sometimes to be able to cope with that, you shame and the problems that they may have with maybe a narcissistic mother and a very remote father, that the family dynamics are very, very broken. And again, I've spoken to many people on this. When you come from families that are very broken, that pain manifests itself in your life in later times. Drug use, promiscuity, continuous relationships that never settle down, involvement in so-called LGBT groups that give you all the affirmation but don't deal with the problems that you're carrying, etc., etc. And again, I'm not here to criticize anybody. I am just here to analysing, why would somebody dress up a religious statue in this way? What does it say about you and your attitudes? What does it say about why you would put this on social media? It says something about more about you, and how do we react as Catholics? And I'm going to ask Catholics something very simple. The best way for us to react sometimes is with patience and silence. No protests. Don't be sharing it around social media. Don't be giving them as much media exposure as they want. These are wounded people, in my opinion. When Sinead O'Connor did her stunt in 1992, and we look back on her life, and we look back on her relationships, she was a very wounded individual. That is what we see in her life. Searching for God in so many different ways, but never actually dealing with what she was dealing with. I always thought it was sad at the end of her life, especially when her son died, to see her life cascade to where it went. And how can we heal these people in these situations? Because, so many gay men speak about the wounds that they carry. The mother wound, the father wounds, the narcissistic over-involved mother, the distant or maybe abusive father, the bullying that they had in school, the feeling of shame, you're not well enough, etc., etc. And in order to cope with that, they will go into acting or drag or over-sexualization or drugs or alcohol, etc., etc. Because you're dealing with a problem. How do you cope with this? And so sometimes what we're seeing in the world is the manifestation of something that is very, very deeply wounded in that person. We're looking at the manifestation of a wound. And then we're judging that manifestation, and maybe we're reacting to that manifestation. And as Catholics, I don't think it's a good place to be reacting. We have to be the rock for the world. We have to found our spirituality on the rock, so that people see in us icons, images of other Christ. I thought it was amazing when I read the poem of the man God, and many people can have you can have all the discussions you like on Maria Valtorta, but this woman knew how to write. Some people say it's sentimentalism, but she has a very interesting way of viewing things. And earlier on, we see the conversion of Mary Magdalene, this woman that had shamed her family, shamed Lazarus, shamed her sister, her mother, shamed, and gone off and lived this life of, sex, parties, etc., etc. And she comes to Jesus one day very scantily dressed. He's there in a Sermon on the Mount, and she's very scantily dressed and scandalizes people. People are rightly scandalized by her provocations. And what does Christ do? He asks his disciples, leave her alone. Say nothing. And allow her to heal, but without this further cycle of shaming her even further. And I think as Catholics, it was just interesting for me to meditate on how Christ and their apostles reacted to situations. To forgive the other. We see it in the gospel. If somebody strikes you, give them the other cheek. I mean, how Christ teaches people to react to these situations is sometimes it's against our nature, because we want to react. But Christ said, look, think how you react. And so for Catholics, sometimes to these events, these stunts that LGBT groups and gay groups do and so forth, think how we react to that in our social media, in our WhatsApps, and our social media posts. We could go up there and protest and, and say you're going to hell and so forth. And many of them are already there in hell. That's the reality. That's the sad reality. Some of these people are so broken, they're already in physically hell. Either in how their relationships have been in their life or how people have treated them, etc., etc. So we need to be agents of God's grace to bring healing into that situation. To bring order into a situation and not to be agents of reaction. The other day, I was watching that all of the different videos of that driver in Liverpool that ran over different people. And, you saw the videos of the very, very early start of it to the end. And, lots of people can have their conspiracies on it, but it really looks like this guy was provoked or panicked into doing something that he probably wouldn't have done normally. At the very start, you see people banging his car and, opening the door. Maybe he was in the wrong place in the wrong time, and being in a car in a crowd sometimes isn't the best thing. But the reality is, human nature can cause provocations and reactions that we didn't intend. And so as Christians, as Catholics, we need to be in a place where we're not always reacting to these provocations, because that's what they want sometimes. They want a reaction. They want the media. They want a story. Why lend ourselves to this? Christ didn't send his apostles out to protest. In fact, many people protested against them specifically because what they were doing was, oh look, you're associating yourself with prostitutes, with the poor, with the people with infections. You're curing people. You're doing this. Tax collectors. You've got an apostle who's a tax collector. They used to look at Matthew because he had changed his life. Well, you've changed your tune. You used to be collecting taxes and sleeping with women, and now you're following Christ. And they used to point the finger at Christ, but Christ didn't send his apostles back to protest against them. In fact, one of the last dying words of our Lord is, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And people are offended by the fact that this statue has been desecrated. When I was meditating on it, that was the phrase that was coming to me. Our Lord saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And it might seem a little defeatist for me to just say this, but sometimes we need to be careful of how we react to these situations. And I give that example of Sinead O'Connor. So many Catholics reacted in a very negative way, and rightly so. But look now at the life and the sad end to her life. So we have to live. If we are truly Catholic, we have to live in a way that is different to the world, higher than the world. We have to rise up against these provocations and love in a different way and bring Christ's grace into these broken people's lives. That's my opinion anyway on it. While this ideology is one thing, the individual person you have in front of you could have issues that you're not aware of, which is why Christ says, don't judge. Sometimes, because we don't know, we see the manifestation, but maybe there's a lot of woundedness there that we don't see, and rejection. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.